Have you ever wondered if it's possible to live in sync with your cycle? Do you struggle with a negative mindset around your period? Are you wondering if it's possible to be feminist and anti-birth control? We're going to explore these questions and so much more in the Managing Your Fertility podcast, because this is about helping you live a whole and full life. I'm your host and guide, Bridget Busacker, joining you in this journey of exploration related to women's healthcare, feminism, and fertility awareness. Are you ready? Let's get started. Megan, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited to have you on and with me today and sharing your wisdom with all of the listeners here.
Yeah, thank you, Bridget. I'm so excited to be here with you.
So before we jump into better understanding the cycle and productivity and how this aligns, I'm going to introduce you more fully. Megan Fowler is a menstrual cycle and productivity strategist and founder of the Aligned Cycle. As a certified fertility care practitioner, she spent years helping women understand their bodies and chart their cycles so they could make important decisions about planning their families and scheduling medical procedures. Then she stumbled into using the power of her cycles and hormonal waves to schedule her work, which is incredible. Now she helps other women put their cycles to work for them so they can make an impact and grow businesses with flow and ease. I cannot wait to jump into this topic. But before we do that, I would love to have more of your background and story and interest in women's health and what that looks like. What does your journey look like in this space?
Yeah, so my story with NFP kind of starts when my husband and I were dating, and I was not Catholic at the time. So I am a convert to the faith. And we were, I don't know how long we would been dating, like maybe a year or so, maybe a few months. I can't remember, but we were having lunch and he turns to me and he asked me, "What do you think about natural family planning?" And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And so I started asking him questions, right? And he had some answers as like a young guy in his 20s. Like he had this idea of there was this thing and it worked this way. And so, he had like some answers for me, but I wanted to know more. I was just like intrigued. I'd always been naturally minded, health conscious, and I had never really considered like, future choices, like, things like hormonal contraceptives I knew were out there. I never had to make any decisions about them, but like I knew they were a thing. And that's about all I knew. I mean, you get the very basics of sex education. And that's about what I had. And so I started researching and Googling, and I was just like blown away by the amount and the just learning about like the amount of information I came across and learning about the way our bodies work as women and our cycles and like what mucus was and that it was good and it was important and you actually could figure out your times of fertility and infertility, and there were all of these different things that I never knew you could pay attention to. So that's like my first little intro. And then during this time, when I was researching, I came across information about like artificial reproductive technologies and started reading like some of the challenges that, surround those, and kind of going a little bit deeper into, I guess for me, it was like, I know I want to become a mother. And what if I can't conceive? And then, knowing now that like some of the challenges that exist with these things that I kind of had absorbed were like your answer, right? You don't conceive. And like, there's all these other things out there, just kind of like for me, like, okay, if you don't want to conceive, there's all these things that you can do. And I hadn't really fully gone there, but I was challenged by it. And so at that point, I was really interested in like starting to track my cycle, and I did it like very loosely. And then I was also had this question that was kind of with me, which was, what do women do when they can't conceive? They're not conceiving naturally, but they don't want to go the artificial reproductive route. And so what happened is eventually my husband and I were engaged, and we went through a marriage prep program. We were in Phoenix at the time, Phoenix, Arizona, and they have an excellent marriage prep program, and they actually require all engaged couples to go through a full course of NFP. So I was really excited because I've been loosely tracking my cycle, but I wanted to know more. And we did like a symptothermal method. So I was taking my temperature, I was checking mucus, and I was looking at my cycles and my charts, and I was like, I think something's kind of off here. And I went to my instructors, and they were really nice, but they were like brand new, and they were like, "Oh, it looks okay," but like my intuition was like, "I don't think this is quite right." Um, so I kind of had that. And then, so at this time, I had been a middle school math teacher. And by the time a year had passed now, and my husband and I got married and we moved, he's in the construction field. And so there was another project. And so I was looking for a new teaching position. And in that time, I saw an opportunity come up for an education program to become a fertility care practitioner. And it was probably like the year prior I had first learned about NAPRO. I was on a drive with a friend who also had converted to Catholicism. And I think we were listening to like Catholic Answers, and a piece came on about NAPRO technology and restorative reproductive medicine, and how it worked to really dig deeper into what was going on with women's health, and to figure out, what are those root cause issues that we can treat, and we can support her overall, health and fertility, and restore that reproductive well-being so that she can then, conceive naturally. And so that was like, wow. So there is this thing that's kind of an answer to a question I had. And so when I saw this education program come up at this time, it was just kind of perfect. So I went, I went through that. I applied, and I went ahead and went through the program, and I started working with clients. And I spent about 7 years working with women and couples, many of which were struggling with some kind of reproductive health issue. Very often it was infertility. Sometimes they were single women, who just had hormonal imbalance or other issues, or they weren't ready to conceive yet, but there was something going on. And so I co-founded Restore Fertility Care. And that was such an honor and a blessing to work with those women and to go with them on this journey when, first they're just learning about their own cycle and their own health and how to understand and read these things. And then, of course, there's the whole medical side that as a fertility care practitioner, you also kind of walk along that journey with them. And so something that just stuck with me was how much information so many women didn't have and wish they'd had sooner, about their bodies, about their cycles, about making medical decisions. And so that was something that I just always thought like, oh, there's this big gap. And so after 7 years, I was ready for a little bit of a break. I was pregnant with my third son. I was homeschooling my older two. And I thought, I just need to take some time away from this, but I knew I was going to come back. And so in that time when I stepped away, I was working on my health and my healing. I have some like digestive issues, and something that like really hard for me in pregnancy in particular. And so I was doing a lot of research and reading, and at some point I read something that talked about how important rest was in traditional Chinese medicine during menstruation. And I thought, that's interesting, right? Like definitely a new idea to me. And I thought, oh, I'm going to try it. And so I did. And I felt personally like I benefited so much from like slowing down for just a handful of days. And I felt like I felt better throughout the cycle. And then I started projecting forward, right? If you know your cycles, your luteal phase length, and you identify ovulation, you can look forward and approximately when your next cycle will start. And so I started kind of keeping those days clear. And then you kind of just keep tweaking things. And then I found some of this research. Gabrielle Lichman has written a book called 28 Days, and she goes through a lot of the studies and the research about how women's moods, cravings, energy levels, and all of that changes throughout the month. And together with like that information and some other resources, putting it together with my own experience, that's really what led me to the aligned cycle, to realizing how much it helped me to kind of balance my drive and my, you know, ambitious kind of like pushing side with also making sure that I was resting, enough and kind of recharging so that I wasn't burning out, right? So that I could continue to do this work and make it sustainable. So yeah, that's kind of my story to where I am today.
This is so incredible. And I love how this stemmed from your husband asking, do you know about NFP? What do you think about NFP? And hear this beautiful journey that really started for you in engaging and learning about it and realizing the power behind understanding your cycle, understanding how your body works. And I want to touch on a little bit more and dig into this aspect of traditional Chinese medicine, because I've read through The Woman Code by Elisa Vitti, which is a great resource, I think, especially for women who are just wanting a good overview of how our cycles actually can work for us and with us, and we can work with it, and having good nutrition and good rest. And she talked about this. She talked about how in Western medicine we somewhat lack that extensive knowledge that traditional Chinese medicine has, and understanding the body and just seeing the value of alternative care aspects, and that can include rest. And so just for you, touching on that as well, through your research, you also found that, okay, this practice of actually resting and incorporating this into our cycles as women and where we are in our cycles actually has incredible power in thinking about, okay, how am I feeling? How am I doing? Am I burning out? Am I not? I love that you said too, you cleared your calendar. Like you were able to find those projections and tweak and say, okay, these are the days I need that rest. Was that hard to do that initially and just figuring that out? And do you still find it kind of challenging in setting aside that time? Because you're a go-getter. You're a go-getter.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reality of our lives as, as women, as mothers, is that it doesn't always work out perfectly. And even, as business owners, as, all of those things, like it's not like I do it perfectly every month. But sometimes you plan things in advance and you don't really know, like 5 months out, how your cycle may be shifting, and so there are times like that. But yeah, it's a new way of thinking. Like it is slightly like it's just it doesn't come necessarily easily, but it wasn't really that hard. It was just kind of like, okay, like if this felt worth it, I'm going to keep doing it and, kind of learn as you go. So, there are some other things that you can, think about during that time. So depending on, where you are personally and like your work situation, your family situation, the other things to think about during that time are how can I support myself, right? Where can I ask for help? How can I communicate this to the people around me, to my spouse, to say like, hey, like I might have lower energy, or, I might need to go to bed early, or, maybe you could help out with this, or maybe it is also, if you can get a meal delivery or something else that helps during that time. So that's so a way that if you can't really clear everything, and even when you can clear everything, sometimes those things are really helpful. And then I think there's also the mindset piece of even when we have things on our calendar that fall in that window where I kind of call it the rest window, and I call it phase one. And so like it's also a matter of like how are we talking to ourselves, in this time? Are we expecting like our highest performance, that we're getting all the things done and we are like running around town, like we've got a jam-packed full schedule, or even like if it's something simple, but then maybe we're not in the best place to be doing that task. Like, are we giving ourselves that grace and that understanding? And that really goes throughout the month. But I think those are two other pieces as well.
That is so great. I want to jump more into this, but I love to give listeners an idea of what the Align Cycle is and what it is you offer before getting
Yeah.
into more of the nitty gritty, because I think this is something that is so incredible that you're doing, that you recognize and really harnessed all this knowledge to put into a business to coach women. I'm starting to give it away, so I'll let you take it
Yeah.
over.
Yeah. So I work either one-on-one, and I am working on beginning a group coaching program with women to walk them through my process, which is basically the first thing that we do together is we create a cycle strategy. And we do that by, looking at all of your work tasks, and we just kind of do a brain dump, and then we sort them based on how you feel about them, like how, because one task for someone might be really draining or like more intense, and it for someone else might be really energy giving. So we kind of sort all of those tasks for that particular woman and then put it into the different phases. And some tasks will span 2 phases. Some might just, you really are trying to get it in one, so that you kind of have an overall guide. And then from there, I teach the different like planning decision kind of points. So at the beginning of your cycle, there's certain decisions and questions you want to be asking to plan out those next few weeks. And then also after ovulation has passed, or right around that time, there's another set of kind of decisions and questions that you want to be asking. So that is what I help women do. I help them usually, like, if we go through about 2 to 3 cycles, it kind of it becomes something that they can do on their own. So I kind of just support them in that process and in making those decisions, and using those questions to guide them as they're scheduling and planning their work.
That is so incredible. I just love this because I think this is something that so many women can benefit from, and I know they are benefiting through you that have worked with you, and just to have this message proliferated and this understanding and really the research behind it too. This isn't just some idea that you've poured in so much time and energy into serving women as a practitioner, and then doing all your research to realize, okay, there's so much more here that we can harness and have this power as women to really make sure that we're not burning out, we're taking care of ourselves, and ultimately we're pouring from a full cup so that we can really pour into the businesses that we run, or the ministries we're a part of, or the workplaces we're involved in, or just the stay-at-home mom life, whatever it might be. um, has this idea of aligning cycles and work schedules, has this been around for a while, and it's just we're starting to see it more and more as the conversation of fertility awareness opens up, or do you really find this is a newer movement altogether?
I think that's a great question. And I don't feel like I know for sure either way, in terms of like the intuitive wisdom, right? Of like cultures that are, in the past, and how they approached understanding like a woman's rhythms. I don't know. I would love to know more. There's in India, I do think like they banish some, some women are like banished from the family, and they're not supposed to cook. And I don't think it's like in a positive way. It's like
Yeah.
you are, unclean, or at least that's the way I think it's communicated. And so I just wonder, was there like wisdom there that got like miss, how would you say, like,
I guess
twisted?
misaligned and
Yeah,
twisted. Yeah.
misaligned, twisted. And are there other cultures that did kind of tune into this? And I just wonder, in our culture, like we are just, um, you know, told, or we get the messaging that we just need to go, and we need to meet all these external expectations of us. And I think there is probably something when you take away, the screens and the technology, and, even like electricity to some extent, where we're able to tune in a little bit more to like nature's rhythms. And, one of those rhythms being the menstrual cycle, but also just, our circadian, our daily rhythms. And we just are able to feel them more and experience them more and tune into that. So I do wonder, I don't really know what, if this is something people have done in the past, but I do think, I hope that it's something that we can share more of, so that women can feel empowered by this. Because I kind of, like you were saying, like I knew how powerful our cycles were, right? To plan our families, to evaluate our health, but this part about how our hormones impact us physically and mentally throughout the month, I didn't fully appreciate. And I think that there is so much there that we all, as women, wherever and however we're working, inside or outside of the home, can use, to support us.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think too what you'd said about different cultures and their outlook on menstrual cycles, and specifically, I think with bleeding and periods, it is very all over the place historically. Looking at that, I know with I don't want to say in general all Native American culture, but in some sects or tribes, I know it was common to send the women away as I not so much as an unclean aspect, but that this was a really holy time or a reverenced time, and so that they were meant to take care of themselves and go away for a little bit. And I always remember thinking about that. I had learned it in, gosh, it came up in like a biology class in high school, and it was one of those random, fun facts that a teacher had that you're like, wait, what was that? Because as a
Yeah.
young woman, you were like, I if that's real, and I
Right.
learned that it was. It's like, I want that. I want to be able to like
Yeah.
go away someplace and like have someone just like allow me to rest and treat me with such like reverence. It sounds amazing. Because I
Yes.
think there's something that speaks so deeply to us to say like we know, I think deep down, and that our bodies are working hard. This is something that is good, although the messaging, I think, and you had talked a little bit about too, that mindset around our cycles has just gotten, I think, so warped into thinking this is so bad, this is so messy, this is so gross, this is such a problem. But I think ultimately, we want that aspect of rest and reverence for our bodies, and we want to reclaim that, because I think that is really how we see that empowerment of ourselves and our cycles. So you had mentioned mindset work. I want to go back to that. So what have you found in the process of doing this? Why is mindset so powerful? Like, why does mindset work help so much in this space?
Oh, I mean, I think mindset is so powerful for all spaces, and just how we are approaching things, what we're telling ourselves we should be doing or we need to do, and being able to take a step back and say, wait a minute, I have the ability to decide and to choose and to kind of discern here, and not just, internalizing whatever messages we've been given and then, putting them upon ourselves. And so, as we go through the month, we just have so many changes. And I think as women, um, we can really be hard on ourselves about those changes, especially if we don't realize why we're going through them and we don't really recognize our patterns. We just experience them and kind of, like, okay, last week I could take care of all these things and that was fine. And this week I'm really struggling, and I just like
Mhm.
feel like it's all too much and I'm questioning everything. And I think once we know where we are in our cycle and once we begin to notice like our thoughts and how they change and how our relationship to different parts of our life changes, we can then reframe things, right? So it's not that, I am, failing and I should just quit all these things and cancel all of these things. That it's like, no, this week, these days, things feel a little bit harder. And this is why, because my hormones are dropping off. And that's what they do to cycling women every cycle. But, in a week, I'm going to be right back up. And like, that's my time to really, hit it harder. And so I'm going to be okay with my best today not being, what it was last week or what it will be in 2 weeks.
I really like that, because that isn't saying, you need to cancel everything. And as if, in a sense that like your body, your cycle is the problem. Like, oh, this is in the way.
Right.
It's really recognizing, okay, this is where I'm going to see some limiting factors here, and that's okay. And then like, here's the reality of what my body is going through, and biologically, physiologically, what's happening. That totally shifts how we can think about things. I mean,
Yeah.
really truly, it's incredible to see that, and the permission that we can give then to ourselves, that it's not just like, oh, what's happening to me. Because I think part of my story is really starting charting in college with the Kandara app, and a lot of the femtech was first coming out, and I remember having conversations with some girlfriends. We were all using this app, and it was always like that aha moment. You're like, "Oh, I don't know how I forgot that my period is coming again, or that it's this week, but this totally adds up." And really, that process of charting helped us to see, oh yeah, this is totally making sense why I feel so tired and why I'm so emotional or why I'm breaking out. But that it's so easy in that hustle and bustle to forget, oh yeah, this is what my body is going through. So I really just so appreciate the work that you're doing to help women to be in that present moment, and present to their bodies in that moment too, of saying, oh, this is what's going on. Okay. I don't
Yeah.
need to beat myself up or wonder, why am I breaking out or what's going on now or why can't I push through or why do I feel brain fog? It's like, let's take a breath, let's take a step back and see, how can we work with our bodies and with our cycles instead of totally berating ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like our cycles too are, if you think about like kind of like you said, like what our body's doing is something so beautiful and so powerful with our cycles and our hormones, right? Preparing each cycle for a potential pregnancy, like for a new life, right? And then responding if it does or doesn't happen, in this like perfect way that, nature has designed our bodies to work. So yeah, it's something that we can appreciate, we can honor, we can integrate it and, like change the way that we approach it and think about it for sure.
I like what you said too of that potential for new life. I mean, I think we just forget the awesomeness of that reality, of that possibility, and I think, whether you may be struggling with infertility or you've experienced loss, or you're in that space of being a single woman and thinking, I am not in a place that I'm planning to get pregnant, there's still this reality that as women, this is the potential that our bodies have and how good that is. We're
Yes.
so quick to separate and say, oh, I choose babies at a later time. I'm not going to think about it. I'll be on hormonal contraception. I won't be thinking about this. I'm going to put this away until I'm ready. But again, that presence of body and mind to say, no, this is a part of me, not that I'm, having to try to get pregnant, if you're in that place as a single woman every month, but just to say that potential is there and it is a good potential and it is good that my body is able to do this. What a gift it is. And I think that's that
Yes.
mindset work too, of that reconnection back to really the goodness of our fertility, which we have just lost so much of. And maybe we never really had it. I don't like to look back and say, like, oh, it was so much better in, this date or this time or this decade, because we're here now and we have this information that we didn't have, 40 years ago, 80 years ago, wherever you want to go that you think is the pinnacle of human life.
Yeah.
But to just say, like, okay, but maybe it's right now. Maybe this is the best time right now. And this is the opportunity I have to really appreciate and learn my body and work on those affirmations to say, like, how good it really is.
Yes. Yes. I love that.
So, with all of this, do you think workplaces, I mean, so much of workplaces have changed with COVID-19 now that we have remote work and we've seen this transition. I know for us in our cities here in Minnesota, they're looking at a lot of companies downsizing. So, spaces, where they're just like remote workers are happy. This is a great setup. So, do you think in some ways this is an opportunity for workplaces to embrace this idea or to have women maybe feeling a little more comfortable in implementing this into their schedules, especially if they're working, I think any job, the corporate job, the nonprofit world, government, higher education, the mompreneur, the entrepreneur, the teacher, like all these different spaces. Do you think it's possible that we could see a movement towards this with workplaces embracing this? Really, I mean, it's women making that change and embracing it too.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I do think there have been so many good things that have come out of the challenges and like the shifts that have happened with what our expectations are around the family and around work, right? Just our comfort. Even my husband, he prior to the pandemic, he was working from home 2 days a week, and now it's more like 4 to 5 days a week, depending on the week. But that, people being comfortable with their kids being present, right? If they come in or if they're crying or, just that level of that shift in like, okay, like, kids are there. Like, this is real life for parents every day, and that we're not trying to hide it. So I think it's really a great like reflection kind of, or like, you know, I don't know how I would say, like with our fertility, as women, we've been told, I think, like we should really hide these things. Like we shouldn't really talk about it. It shouldn't impact anything. It shouldn't be seen or like shown, or we shouldn't communicate about it. And, similarly, like if you're working from home, make sure that like your children are nowhere around or they're not impacting the way you work. And that's just not the reality. I think it's still challenging. I think we're a little ways away from women being able to fully realize this in traditional workplaces, but I do feel like we're making progress to it. I think so much of just the cycle and fertility awareness, and now people talking more about, how this really impacts us. I think someone contacted me recently who was giving a talk at, I don't know if it was a smaller company or a larger corporation, but she was going to talk about cycle issues. And she was asking me about, for these women in these positions, what can they do when they can't really move around their schedule in the same way? And of course, I said finding support or asking for help where you can, and the mindset piece. But I thought, just those little ideas and planting these seeds are really positive. But I think, Bridget, what you said, that it's on us as women in a large part to dive deeper and to be willing to talk about this even among ourselves, and to share this knowledge and to kind of practice living it. And I think that is a powerful place to start as well. So I think, and I hope that it will, come both, from women outwards, and also, maybe also in a top down capacity at some point. I don't know if most employers, traditional employers, are going to be open to having that conversation, and I'm not even sure what that looks like, but I think there is a lot there that is worth exploring, and that I do hope we make some progress around.
I think what you said too, and just identifying and elaborating on that idea of starting with women, starting with ourselves versus that top down approach. I think sometimes we see that as like an either or, when I think starting with us makes so much sense, because it's an opportunity to create a movement. I mean, really, in this space of fertility awareness as a whole, this is such a broader part of the story now, I think, especially for women in the home, working outside the home, wherever, whatever that context might be, and really figuring out, okay, how do I embrace my fertility in this space? Like what you said too, embracing our kids being at home with work from home life. And if you hear, kids making noise or something, it's like, well, this is real life. This is what's
Right.
happening. Because I think sometimes we get stuck on the idea that someone else has to do it, or someone else has to approve of this for me to do this, when
Yes.
really this can start from a woman saying, okay, I'm going to work with Megan, I'm going to work on identifying my cycle impacting my work schedule, and just from that, to see the impact in your own work, that's going to speak volumes, when you're in that performance review, or you're looking to see, are you making your goals, however that looks in the context of your work. And then having other women look to that and say, like, what are you doing that's so different? Like, those are the conversations that I think can make so much more impact, because I think we forget that in this space of fertility awareness, we're really creating this as an opportunity for generations to come. And I think in
Yes.
that space of instant gratification and Amazon Prime, and we can have things at such a quick rate, we forget that these types of structures and rebuilding of structures and creating new foundations, this takes time. In the same way that, I always think of Sagrada Familia in Spain, and just thinking about the work that this cathedral has been in the works for like hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And the builder knew this. He knew that he would not see it in his lifetime, but he poured his hands and his heart into knowing that this would be beloved by so many, not for his sake, but for the very fact of just being able to worship and be in a beautiful space and being impacted. And I think about that so much in this space, like the work that you're doing and the work that so many are doing, and the women that are coming through your program and really trying to make changes in the workplace. This is work that we're doing for our daughters, our granddaughters, our great granddaughters, and hoping that these are the changes that will make impact. So this is like seamless for them, that it, and hopefully for my daughter, she's in the workplace and it's coming from top down and within. Like, how beautiful that would be. And I think that encouragement of knowing that yes, it's hard work, but the payoff is so amazing, because the work that we're doing is so foundational and such a beautiful rebuilding.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I think that really is, the power in this. And so, passing these things on to our children, and even just our small communities, whatever, however small it feels, to be able to talk about these things and to educate in small ways and empower. And I really think there is like so much power and beauty and hope in that.
It's so good. I'm just so excited to be chatting with you about this. And I hope through this, we'll be for sure sharing your website and different ways for women to contact you so that they can work with you, because I think this is something that we all need to have increased awareness on, education on, and really refining how we're working and what we're doing to, make impact in our families and in our communities, but also for ourselves, to recognize our body is so good, and that connection and that reconnection back to our fertility, to say this doesn't have to be pushed off to the side. I don't have to blame this or say, ugh, it's my period and I can't get things done. It's like, okay, this is my body's way of telling me it's okay to invite a little bit of rest in, that I don't have to be a part of the hustle culture and the hustle juice and I don't know. I find that the hustle, the hustle game gets a little tiring after a while because it's just not sustainable. So I'm really grateful for your work in helping women to truly live sustainable lives, thriving lives, and through the power of their cycle. So thank you so much for all that you're doing.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you for having me. And I do have, I have a guide on my website that, you can download, and it just kind of walks you through the different phases and is a good starting place if you just kind of want to see like, oh, like how might I be able to approach my cycle? So that's one resource. And thank you so much for having me. Such a great conversation, such an honor to be here and chat with you about this.
This is so great. And I will definitely mention that guide in the show notes too. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think that's a great starting point for someone who's like, oof, do I want to start working or not? I mean, the answer is yes, you do. But if you're not there yet, this guide is a really great way to just get started. And I think that's the biggest step, is, making that progress one step at a time. So thank you so much. And listeners, I hope that you enjoyed this episode and are able to check out Megan and her great work and start learning how to really align your cycle with the work that you do every day. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, and help expand the conversation around women's health. If you'd like to learn more about fertility awareness, visit www.managingyourfertility.com for more information, resources, guides, and so much more.